From when I was young, I had this question. How do plants stand on its own without bones? So I know these trees can stand on its own because of the huge wood that's made out of a bunch of cellulose. But how do other plants stand on its own? So to first answer this question, we need to first look at what all living things require. Water. So plants, like all living things, require water, not just because it's a universal solvent and is needed for many chemical reactions, or not just because to make sugar and to store energy, but plants also need water for structure as well. Water molecules tend to move from a higher concentration to lower concentration. This is known as osmosis. So let's think of plant cells as rectangles. So when there are no waters in these cells, like these cells are all shrunken down, but when water comes in via osmosis, these cells build what's called turgor pressure, which is the cell membrane pushing against the cell wall, making the cell kind of like a brick structure. So these cells all like put together make up like hard structures to make these plants stay stiff. But when water goes out, these cells shrink again, and therefore the plant wilts. It is a hot day today. My back is starting to sweat. Speaking of sweating, did you know that plants also sweat? This is called transpiration in plants, where water is sucked up from the roots and it moves through the stems and into the leaves through what's called xylems. Xylems are these little straw-like pipes that are almost about everywhere in the plants. So when water gets sucked up into the stem and then it goes to the leaves, it evaporates through what is called the stomata, or the little holes in plants. So plants, water moves up the xylem by what is known as capillary action, which is the combination of the adhesive and cohesive properties of water. So let's talk about capillary action for a bit. So here's a little experiment on capillary action. So here's a tissue, right? And here is a water cup, and here's an empty cup. I'll soak this in here, and then I'll put the other half of the tissue in here. And then, if you look closely, you can see the water moving up the tissue. And it's gonna soon transport water from this end to this end. This is because of the adhesiveness of water attaching to the polar molecules of this fiber in this tissue. And then you can kind of think of it as like the cohesive clumps of water trying to climb over each other, and then just transporting water from this side of the tissue to this side of the tissue. So back to the plant. The water is soaked up from the roots, as said before, and then it moves up the xylem and then into the leaves through capillary action, which you just saw with the experiment right there. And then it leaves the stomata and it evaporates into the atmosphere. And actually, according to the United United States Geological Survey, about 10% of the atmosphere's moisture comes from the transpiration of plants. So what you're seeing here is a graph of the enzyme activity in humans. And so the line here represents 40 degrees Celsius, and when the temperature goes over 40 degrees Celsius, the enzyme activity suddenly decreases. And if you remember correctly, enzymes lower activation energy to quicken the reactions. And therefore, as enzymes slow down, or when enzymes decrease activity, that slows down our metabolic processes. And the same goes for plants. It slows down their metabolic processes. So when plants transpire, so when we sweat or when plants transpire, plants are cooling down. We are cooling down, which is partially why plants transpire quickly in desert areas or like hot climates. But then here's the question then, if plants dry up so quickly in hot climates, how about the desert where it's extremely hot? How do cacti survive? So here again is a picture of a cactus. So the cactus have evolved to have a more widespread root to suck more water up. And their stems also evolved, and they are used for not only transporting water but store large quantities of water. And because cacti have spines instead of leaves, they have less surface area, and therefore they have less stomata on them, and therefore they transpire less and store more water. So cacti evolved to lose less water in hot climates, and we have evolved to sweat, to cool down, to keep up our metabolic processes. Like this, evolution plays a huge role in our ecosystem. Whether it's humans or plants or other animals, they all adapt to their environments to survive and not die, and to make more offsprings and then pass on and then live on.